These are the notes for Section 7 for the ALICE unit. We're going to cover negative exponents. Recall that exponents usually mean that you are repeatedly multiplying by the same thing. A negative exponent actually means you are repeatedly dividing by the same thing. So 2 to the 4th means that you are multiplying 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. So 2 times itself 4 times. But 2 to the negative 4th actually means that you are multiplying 1/2 times 1/2 times 1/2 times 1/2. So you can write that as 1/2 to the 4th power. Remember that dividing by 2 and multiplying by 1 are the same thing. So the rule for handling negative exponents is to make it positive by multiplying by the reciprocal of the base. The saying that you can remember is, move negative exponents to the other side of the fraction. And just like in our activity, remember that negative cake is the same thing as beverage, and negative beverage is cake. So let's use that thought process here. X to the negative 4th is saying that Alice is eating negative 4 ounces of cake because this is in the numerator. Well, that just doesn't make sense. So we're going to write it so it does make sense. So Alice isn't eating negative 4 ounces of cake. Alice is drinking 4 ounces of beverage. So we're going to move this to the other side of the denominator, or the other side of the fraction, which is the denominator. So in this next example, we have Alice eating negative 5 ounces of base 3 cake. Again, doesn't make sense. So again, this is in the numerator right now. So we're going to shift to the denominator. And so this turns into 1/3 to the 5th power. Now, if you have a negative in the denominator, you can shift that to the numerator. In the context of Alice, this is saying that Alice is drinking negative 5 ounces of beverage. Doesn't make sense. What she's really doing is eating 5 ounces of base X cake. So we'll shift that to the numerator. When you have an example where you have a numerator and a denominator, we will simply flip both the numerator and the denominator. So remember the parenthesis says this negative 6 is really being applied to both the 2 and the 3. So we are simply going to move the base of 3 to the numerator and the base of 2 to the denominator. And our final answer here would be 3 to the 6th over 2 to the 6th. Let's look at the last 4 examples. 1/2 to the negative 11th. Again, this negative 11 is being applied to both the 1 and the 2. And to work out that problem then, we need to flip both. So we're going to get 2 to the 11th over 1 to the 11th. 1 to the 11th is just 1, so our final answer is just 2 to the 11th. Now, this is a problem we have to pay attention to really carefully. So remember, this 2 is a coefficient. It has a positive 1 exponent. So this negative 6 is only being applied to the base of x. And so the 2 is going to stay where it's at, and the x, this negative 6 ounces of cake, of base x cake, needs to go to the denominator. And the same on this next example, the 2 has a power of 1, so it's going to stay put, and the x to the negative 6 is going to shift to the denominator. And so now Alice has 6 ounces of base X beverage and 4 ounces of base X beverage, which is the same as 10 ounces of base X beverage. In the last example here, remember the 3 and the 12 are coefficients, and we're going to reduce them like a fraction. 3 goes into 12 4 times. The x in the denominator, I'm going to move to the numerator before I do anything else. I always like to get rid of my negative exponents. And so I still have a 5 in the numerator, and that x to the 7th is going to move up to the numerator. The y to the 8th in the numerator and the y to the 2nd in the denominator, I'm going to go ahead and reduce those. So I have 8 ounces of base Y cake, 2 ounces of base Y beverage. So I have more more cake than beverage. So I'm going to be left with 6 ounces of cake, base Y cake. And then just one more step. And maybe some of you, when you moved that -7 beverage to the numerator, you would have already maybe added that in the same step. And that's fine. We have 5 ounces and 7 ounces, so altogether we have 12 ounces of that base X cake. And the y to the 6th is still there, and the 4 from 3 reducing into 12 4 times is going to stay in the denominator. So x to the 12th times y to the 6th over 4.